You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm Doug Thorpe, and today we're going to be talking about the current employment market. Much has been written and shared, certainly in social media and in mainstream media, about some of the challenges that employers face and some of the mindsets that employees seem to be living with. My guest is Liz Capants. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Yeah, so Liz is a professional in the space of placement and recruiting. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, Liz, kind of how you got into everything you're doing right now.
Yeah, so thank you, Doug. I stepped into recruitment as a second career. Worked for a firm prior to launching my own practice. And coming from a sales marketing background, it was something for me that I just never looked back. It was just something that very naturally worked for me. So, yeah.
Well, employers everywhere are definitely thinking staffing and recruiting is top of mind. Despite some of the economic indicators we've got, overall, a lot of job markets are still very strong and competitive. And I know in probably the last month, there's been a big wave of tech announcements about layoffs and reductions in staff. But what are some of the things you're hearing and seeing in your world?
Yeah, it's such a mixed market right now, Doug. Overall, very hard to gauge. I just wrote a post about this earlier this week because when we look at the numbers and the data from October, unemployment did rise a little bit to 3.7%. Number of jobs, as was predicted, was lower in terms of the number of jobs added. But then you have the other side of the puzzle where employers are still finding it hard to find talent in certain sectors. So it's really a very confusing market right now. I haven't really seen this in many years, if ever.
I know my own larger corporate clients that I do work with, probably without exception, they're all reporting vacancies in their approved headcount. So they've got budget for a staffing level that's X, and they're dealing with X minus 5, 10, 12, maybe 100. They've got openings. They're scrambling to try to fill, and they just can't seem to find candidates willing and able to fit in.
Yeah, it's so confusing. I know. And then when you mentioned about the tech layoffs, I read something recently. Amazon is getting ready to go through some layoffs themselves. So it's very inconsistent with what we're seeing based on this data.
Well, yeah, in that ledger, Facebook announced, I think, 11,000 cuts. Twitter, of course, I personally, I'm counting the whole Twitter phenomenon as an anomaly. I mean, whatever Musk is going to do there I don't think that's indicative of any particular trend in the economy one way or the other. I think that's Elon Musk.
Yes, agreed.
Amazon's a different story. Facebook's certainly a different story. And a couple of the other fintech companies have announced some reductions. They haven't, to my knowledge, they haven't tagged headcount specific, but they've said we're going to be cutting operating expense. Well, to me, that's code for headcount reduction.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
That's your biggest nut usually is the level of staffing. Well, if people are in fact in the market as a candidate, what kinds of things are you advising them to look for?
Yes, great question. So we work with a broad range of industries as well as skill sets and functions. What's really growing right now is organizations in sustainability, energy, e-commerce, construction is very solid. So those are some industries to keep an eye out for and to focus on. Those are growing. As far as the jobs and the skills themselves, those I know many of the clients that we work with, some of those roles are being developed now. So they're changing due to the virtual setup of employees. So jobs can get consolidated sometimes. So that's something that we work with clients to help really clearly define those roles and what the skills are. A big part of what we do, though, from a job seeker's perspective, is to really help focus on the branding and how to brand themselves. Because when you're looking for a job, you are selling yourself. It's a sales process and never easy to sell yourself. So we do a lot of work on helping to brand yourself, helping to market yourself throughout the job search. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that's a concept that is often a challenge. Part of my background and one of my early entries into coaching was in career transition, working with people that had lost jobs and were now wanting to search. And I go back to the 2008 recession when the unemployment was double digits. So there were large populations of people that just were caught up in somewhat arbitrary cuts. You know, the company said, we're cutting 20% and here's the line and you're in the pool. So, and I know that the work I did back then, I too was helping people decide on a personal brand. And that was very foreign to most job seekers. The common mindset when people came to me, it was the first time in 5, 10, 15 years they had ever had to search for a job. So their first task in their mind was just to dust off my resume and update it.
Yeah.
And I was saying to them, no, we have to define a personal brand first. And I had my own 6-step model, and writing the resume was down at step 3.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah,
and,
you're exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also, I see that when people are let go and coming from corporate, it's a mindset shift, because when they lose that identity of that company and then all of a sudden they have to hustle and put themselves out there, it's a transition that's not easy to make for a lot of people, because they've had the the recognition of the company, the employer, for so many years. And then when that goes away, and if they haven't interviewed in 10, 20 years, it can be really hard to shift and start hustling and like a mad person, like I am sometimes, but really selling yourself. And that's part of the branding, as you know, branding yourself and putting yourself out there. But it's a harder transition coming from a corporate job after many years, as you know.
Yeah.
So
still speaking about the candidate mindset and candidate view of things, have you seen a shift in prospects' mindsets about the kinds of things they're asking for in the jobs they're looking to fill?
In the job
from
seeker?
the candidate, the candidate's perspective, do you think they've changed their criteria for where they really want to work?
Yeah, yes, definitely. The pandemic has contributed to that mindset. We've also got a lot of the Gen Z younger workers coming into the workforce, a lot of baby boomers that may have retired during the pandemic, taken a package. So we've had this mass exodus of workers. Now we've got the younger workers coming in, and their whole mindset and approach is very different than historically the older generation, right? So they're looking at this as really wanting that work-life balance. Number one, they want the give back or the mission of the company. So it's not just a job; it's going to fit into their lifestyle. It's really an interesting. I've done a ton of research on this demographic in the workplace, and really what they're looking for is very different. So,
Well, that's what I'm wondering, and I'm going to be. It's probably going to sound really blunt and crude to that audience, but do they even really know what work-life balance is? I mean, can they really define it, or is it just a convenient buzzword they heard from their friends and they're going after it that way?
yes, that's a great point. I've seen many different variations of what somebody might think work-life balance, and some, to your point, really don't know what that is. So there's many different perspectives, I think, for this younger group.
Yeah,
It's yeah, interesting times for them, and as we shift in the workplace.
and flipping over to the employer side of the equation, are you seeing any shifts in the way people are trying to do their recruiting and hiring process?
So that's a great question. That's a loaded question, Doug. I could go on for a long time. It's like, okay, where do I begin? But it needs change. I would say, yes, it needs significant change. There's so much technology, there's AI, so many tools around the automation, which is needed, but it tends to take away from really that people and human aspect of who we're hiring, and really managing people first. That's really at the core of how I work. And you might have a perfect resume on paper, but maybe that person really isn't a fit for the company, or for whatever reason. So I think that the whole process is starting to change. We're seeing more of a level field in terms of the less hierarchy. People need less management because they've worked autonomously, so they're more productive for the most part. So less management structure that has evolved over the past couple of years. And I think one of the projects I'm working on right now, I can share with you, is basically a recruitment etiquette and protocol to how to manage each stage of the recruiting process with your candidates and really treat them as your client, and something that we don't see every day, unfortunately.
I interviewed a young man from Canada a few weeks ago on my show, and he runs a recruiting and placement agency. But one of the things they have latched onto, and he professes that they've gotten great traction with it, is they're working with hiring companies and having them stand up their interviewing managers, their hiring managers, on video presentations to share with the candidate. And it all came from the old adage that people join companies but quit bosses.
Yep.
So he said, well, let's flip that equation around. Let's present the boss and frame and shape the boss, and let the candidate early in the process make the decision of whether or not that's a person they want to work for.
Wow. I love that.
They have sort of really cut through a lot of the friction that is normally in the traditional process. And he said, yes, we coach hiring managers a little bit on how to better present their story, but we really get them to focus on the core elements of what it is they're really offering and what it would be like to work in their department.
Oh, I love that.
He said it has really, I forget his exact number, but what I'm recalling is it's more than doubled the success rate on the matches.
Wow. Oh, that's brilliant.
Because people are getting to see the boss in his or her native state, and talking the way they talk and communicating the way they communicate. And if you don't have a chemistry for that, you're not a good candidate for that job.
Right. Interesting. I think that's a great it's a great step. It's a great structure. And I think we're going to see more different processes come out in the next couple of years because it has changed. The whole workplace is in flux, and I think there's going to be more variations out there. I think the one issue with talent and recruitment, Doug, is that it's not regulated. And so as a result of that, it can be the Wild West sometimes because companies either aren't prepared, don't know their budget, don't know what to ask in the interview, and they're kind of maybe thrown into a situation where they really don't know or not prepared. So, without having that uniformity and or regulation, it tends to be and can be somewhat of a very dysfunctional process, unfortunately. So I love hearing some new ideas like this that are coming on the market, and I think we're going to see more of that.
Well, to your point, I agree totally, and it's definitely been my experience. And one of the dilemmas, and I talk about this a lot in my own leadership development program work, we tend to promote people off of the front line. We need a supervisor, so we go look at who the best performer is, and we put them into the supervisory role. And then if they work around that and have some success, guess what? We promote them up to manager. And then next thing you know, they're director, VP, or whatever. And these skills, like conducting a proper, effective interview, are never taught.
Right.
And you might have had it modeled to you, and you might think about a few questions, but again, going back to my the early days when I was coaching and doing career transition work, what I used to tell people is, if your interviewer starts the whole session with the question, "Tell me something about yourself," you are now in control.
Yes. Yeah. That loaded question we all get. Because
I believe that is a red flag sitting across the desk in the hiring manager's seat, telling you, I don't have a clue what I'm getting ready to do here. I've got some ideas and some questions, but let's start with tell me something about yourself. And I think number one, I think it's a horrible question as a hiring manager. There are other ways to get to the meat of what you're really wanting to know.
Yes, it is. It's an icebreaker question that is just used everywhere, but it is, you get responses, and even I will actually use it in my approach getting to know candidates, and I'm vetting, and I'll sometimes get these responses. Well, back in 7th grade, and then I went to high school, and I'm like, I don't want it. You don't want the life story.
Yeah. Stop.
But you get like this whole. So it is. It's not a great question, but it's a typical icebreaker just to kind of make that person feel at ease and comfortable. But I agree. It's like, okay, where do we start? What's your pitch?
I know. Well, Liz, I'll tell you what, it's time that we take a short commercial break here in the show. We're going to drop a message in. And when we come back, I've got some more questions about the current environment and what we're looking ahead for the new year. So hang with us, folks. We'll be right back.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to DougThorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to DougThorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's DougThorpe.com.
All right, everyone, we're back. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Doug Thorpe here talking with Liz Capants. Liz is in the placement game. And Liz, I probably dove too quick into some of the pressing questions I had. Talk to us about your process. I know you've evolved and you've stayed up with the market and you've tried to create some things, but walk us through your process for working with candidates.
Yeah, sure. So over the years, I've evolved from when we first started. And about 8 years ago, my EBC business is my core: search, headhunting. We look for anything from, chief development officer, VP of marketing, mid to senior level. And then how the network grew was when I came across really great candidates that weren't aligned with my immediate jobs. I would help to connect and broker introductions to companies that were aligned with their background for informational interviews, which are super helpful. I teach referral networking. If you've been with a company for many years and maybe don't have time to network, networking takes a lot of time. And so through the Erudites community, and it's also for business owners too, with that same skill of connecting, the network and the EBC search business work together. So it's sort of a hybrid model where we are today. And then when COVID hit, it accelerated the need to connect and keep the door open. Networking is always important. So, yeah.
So just to be clear, you've got your recruiting and placement business. That's the EBC Associates.
Yep.
That's your brand. Correct. There. And then you've created this networking group. And what is it called again?
It's called Erudites Networking.
Okay.
Yep. And we're global. So we have members all over the world. And we meet to share connections, share referrals. We also give back to the community. We support some nonprofits, but it's just really grown very much through that whole approach of finding a job, finding a business opportunity, and really taking a holistic approach to that effort. So
is that a kind of a social tribe thing, or is it a membership platform?
Yep, it's a membership platform, vetted community. Many of the people in the business network I've known for many years, and so just sort of pulled them together. Other business owners, solopreneurs, etc. Nice. So when you,
well, good. Well, so back to the candidate side of things. What do you try to bake into your process of getting someone prepared to go to market?
Yes, I would say number one thing is focus and know exactly what your value add and your skill is to the employer. Oftentimes, even if it's point blank on paper, the employer doesn't connect the dots with how you might fit into this role or to this organization. So it's really important to be crystal clear on what you want and what you're focusing on, and being able to articulate that first and foremost.
I'm reminded again, I referred to my days of helping in career transition. And one of the things I actually was an advocate of when we did get ready to write resumes and prepare profile things, I actually encourage people to change their job titles on their history. And to change them, not to fabricate or falsify anything, but to make it more communication friendly. And my argument was, and I told this story many times, back in the day when I was a manager and wanting to hire people, I'd go to HR and say, hey, I need to create this job. Here's the thing, da-da-da. And the HR would say, what do you want to call it? And you know what my answer was? I don't care. You tell me what we need to call it. And they would come up with some name, and God love the candidate that took that job. They were now forevermore stuck with that title on their resume the rest of their life. And I, as the guy that was running the business, didn't care what we called it. And
interesting.
So I encourage people, because sometimes companies get really crazy about what they label a job.
Yeah.
And it means nothing in the open market.
Yep.
So I used to tell my candidates to get a little more liberty about the way they present that. And I would have the legalists that would come back to me and say, oh, but I'm falsifying my record. What if my new guy calls my old guy and they call me out on it? And I'll say, no, just explain to them you were trying to be more conversant about it. And,
Yeah.
yes, my legal title back then was XYZ, but what it meant was A, B, and C.
Yes. Yeah. I love that, because titles, even as simple as, say, an account director title,
Yeah.
can vary very drastically in many companies. And I've seen that numerous times. You would think it would mean the same thing if it's in the same industry, at least. Let's say it's account director in advertising agencies, right? You would think it would be the same. It doesn't always mean the same.
No.
And so, yeah, that's a
And
great
even
exercise.
even in the technical realm. So, I mean, I've run into, IT people, network engineers. That doesn't always mean the same thing everywhere.
Yep.
Production maintenance director, that doesn't always mean the same thing. And
Yeah.
it's all over the board. So I always used to encourage candidates to try to line up those titles with, what was more pertinent in the direction they were trying to go.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great exercise. And of course, focus on the skills behind that and the outcomes that goes into that whole job description. But being as laser focused from the candidate, sometimes candidates will say to me, well, I'll do anything, or I'm open. Well, open to what? You can't be open, because it's no one's going to be able to figure that out. You have to know intuitively, what you want to target at this stage, right? And what that is. So,
and I'll say, somebody in the audience is probably saying, yeah, but what happened when they got caught? Well, all I can tell you is my organization ran through about 4,500 candidates, and we had 0 get called out on that issue.
Wow. Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
And we had a pretty high success rate in placement. So, never became an issue. So, interesting thing.
It is.
What are you seeing? One big compelling question that's on the minds of a lot of the business owners and managers I work with is, where are we going with remote work? Do you think it's here to stay, or do you think there's variations, or what are we returning to, an in-office normal, or what do you see going on in your world?
I think we're still trying to figure it out. And I think my 2 cents, for what it's worth, Doug, is that the virtual hybrid model will always be here. And but I also see, what's interesting, and I was having this conversation the other day, is that while you keep hearing and reading about people that want the flexibility, or they want, virtual, all virtual, or part virtual, there's also a certain number of people that hate working from home. It's just, we never hear about them. And they just, not because they have kids or dogs, or they just, for them, it just has never worked, and they need to get out of there. They need to separate, their home from their work. And so many of those are happy to be back, into the office. And we just don't read about them, but they're out there. And but I think virtual work will be here permanently. I think companies are many still trying to figure it out. And I've seen many different scenarios, but I think it will be here to stay. So.
Yeah, I certainly entertain those questions with my own clients, and I'd have to say, at this point in my book of business, if you drew a scale, of one end of the scale said 100%, we want you back in the office, no remote work allowed. The other end of the scale was pretty wide open, fine, stay at home, we're good. I think I've got companies at every dot along that scale on what they're doing and what they're trying to enforce.
It's not easy. Yeah.
The one thing I think that is emerging, some reports that I've heard of late, is that some of the younger workers, talking back to your demographic you mentioned earlier, they're recognizing that they're losing opportunity by being remote. they don't get to demonstrate what they really know, or they don't get to have visibility with senior leaders in the company.
Yep.
So they are aware of missing out.
Agreed. And especially for that early stage, I think it's really critical for them to have that in-person time, learning, getting mentorship. I think it's really important for them to have more of that than somebody who's mid to more senior level in their career for those reasons. Yes, I think they'll just learn tremendously. And just the meetings and such, I've had a ton of in-person meetings lately, Doug, and it's so much more beneficial when you get that face time, and especially starting a new job, a new career, you gain so much. Yeah.
Well, I had a colleague recently that we were in a meeting and we were talking about all of that, and he said, face it, we're tribal animals. We need to be in our tribes, and whether that's at home or at work, and those are two different tribes, and you can't do one in the middle of the other. So his argument was the pendulum will swing, and we will see a return more to in-person office present or facility present employment. And clearly there are some jobs that, technical writers, analysts, and others can, they can do a lot of their work remotely as long as they've got the right computer hookup. But I think from an organizational standpoint, we may well see the pendulum swing back to what we knew as normal before the pandemic. With some variation of opportunity to stay remote. I don't know. It is, bottom line, I'm with you. It's a wild card. I think we're all still struggling to figure it out, find the best answer for it. So more to come on that subject.
I know. Interesting to see, but it's also interesting just how we never hear about these certain people that can't work well from home. They don't get much, you just don't read much about it. At least I don't, but I speak to these people. So they really enjoy, and they have to be in an office to work, and they're out there.
Well, I have a good friend that is in sales, and when the 60 days into the lockdown, he was climbing the walls because he was a type A plus extrovert. And there was no audience at home, and he was emotionally dying because he could not entertain his normal audience. He truly was. I literally talked to him about getting some mental health help on it because it was really impacting him in a very unhealthy way.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but it's this whole thing has not been easy for so many reasons, and that being one of them. It's isolating, and if you live alone, or if you
and it's not funny, but on the other side of that spectrum, I ran into clients who were more introverted, analysts and engineers and such, and they were loving it. And I actually had one person say, I don't have to deal with the clowns at work.
But well, exactly. I know it works differently for
cuts both
people
ways.
that way. And then some people, like on the flip side, they're so much more productive from home, and they don't have the drama that maybe they had in the office as much. So it's just but
Liz, I really appreciate you sitting in and sharing with us. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about your work.
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. My website is a great way to contact. We have a contact form. It's ebcassociates.net. You can reach me there. So either one of those ways would be great. And I appreciate the time, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, folks, we'll have those links and information in the show notes, so feel free to hop down and check that out if you do want to get in touch with Liz. And I do want to remind everybody there is a video version of this over on YouTube, and it is on a channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Feel free to join in over there, subscribe, and you'll get notices. We are dropping 3 shows a week, so we've got a lot of content coming at you. I would welcome your feedback and your input for other topics and ideas that you're interested in. So leave us a note, leave us a like, a share, or whatever. And for now, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, and have a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.